there was a moment when there's a time taken to reassess, reinvent, reshape.
But every fucking time I do this, I don't unmute it. I don't know why it starts muted. It's a waste of fucking time.
Has had to lead the way sometimes, but also to be very, very cognizant about what the requirement was. On occasion, it's got it wrong. 1645 is a classic case in point. But my Philip's recent monarchs have been so sure-footed with this, and that's exactly the point Julie was making about how the Queen has established things in this marvellous way.
What you're seeing
I've got it, it all finished.
I think we saw just a moment ago by Blackrod, Sarah Clark, the first.
Something I did find out was quite interesting,
members
though.
of the Lords, Hilary Benn there nodding his head.
Well,
we're seeing the members of the Lords and the Commons go past to pay their respects. Kate Hoey, you can see there, we just saw Michael Howard, Lord Howard, as he is now, Dame Eliza Manning and Buller a short time ago, the head of MI5, all filing past.
They was talking about the Constitution a minute ago, that's why I went live. And they stopped talking about it, so it's a waste of fucking time. But the police said something very interesting.
This week is a deeply sobering moment. For her, of course.
I don't know.
Kistama, the leader of the opposition.
How much money does this all cost? Look at it. They ain't even seen all that. All this shit on there. Yeah, I know, I'm not going down there. You're mad. Take me all afternoon to get up here.
No matter how many times you prepare yourselves, we prepare ourselves for something like this, Chris, it still slightly takes your breath away, does it not?
Oh, completely it does, Tom, and I think that was something felt by everybody here as we all watched with our own eyes the coffin pass in front of us. And you've already remarked on it, we did too at the time as we saw the imperial state crown placed on that velvet cushion, glinting in
well
the
said,
sunshine.
that.
What a contrast to the
well said. Yeah, I've got to put this camera
much darker and gloomier scenes last night when the Queen's coffin arrived in London from that journey from Edinburgh Airport. And it's hard to describe, Tom, the crowd. We've been discussing how increasingly now people want to film these events. We've seen all the mobile phones in the air, but the moment at which the coffin and the procession passed and people put their phones down, there was like a ripple of applause which you could hear, which started at the Queen Victoria Memorial here and moved up the Mall. And as we look at the scenes right now inside Westminster Hall, there will be a small, what they're telling us is an administrative change while they ready that hall for members of the public. And remember, there will be a continuous vigil mounted around that catafalque. And at some point, you can see one of the vigils going on as we speak, but at some point, Tom, we expect one of the watches to be mounted once again
Queen Mother's
by
funeral was
members
before
of the
the
royal
fucking
family, just as we saw at St Giles Cathedral in those very moving moments. A couple of days ago, we will see the King and his siblings.
She was either born or died on the 11th of August, one or the other.
In their uniforms to mount one of those vigils. There will be a continuous watch now from this point until 6:30 in the morning on Monday, when there will be the next significant change as they ready their coffin for the state funeral.
The state funeral that no cunt will get to see unless you're there early. It's my fault really for not getting up this morning.
Well, Chris, I don't know whether you could see them, we're just watching the last
that's what happens, mate, when you slack.
Lord file past the Queen's coffin as they exit. But just a short time ago, we were seeing an area of beautiful bridges, and already the queue.
I went the other way, boys.
Many people. We expected many people, of course, but it's clear there is going to be
a huge public response.
Vape pens from Naked Extracts.
Who want to have that moment, and it will be a moment, but a brief moment to pay their own respects in the days ahead.
But
it will be a brief moment, of course, but I think one that no one who takes
everything's
part
alright if
in
you're looking to go to sleep.
Lying in states will ever forget the moment
But
that
fucking, if you're looking at the function during the day and that, I wouldn't suggest it, mate, to be completely honest with you.
To file past the coffin of Britain's longest reigning monarch, and you can see there Lambeth Bridge, which is on the other side is St Thomas's Hospital, on this side is the start of Millbank, and they will work their way through Victoria Park. Just
Any
at the
message,
top of the
Jules?
screen there. You can see a security tank or something similar, and that's going to be the start of the public's participation in this. We've just seen the royal family's participation, we've just seen the politicians, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and the various officials of the two houses in the Palace of Westminster. Now it's a turn for the public, and that's the point that's been made to us, Tom, by Buckingham Palace themselves. This, they tell us, is the moment the royal family handed over their mother's coffin to the nation. They've had their personal and private moments last night. They know that they've got this 4.5-day period now of this lying in state. And if Scotland and the seats in Scotland, Tom, were anything to go by, that was just for 24 hours. This is 4.5 days, and that's the Great Hall right there in the centre of the screen, Westminster Great Hall, the oldest part of the Palace of Westminster, right now closed momentarily while they ready the coffin for the entry of the first members of the public. And the Crown Jeweller, Tom, is about to go in there and place the orb and a sceptre on the coffin alongside the Imperial State Crown, which was made for the Queen's father, King George VI, for his coronation in 1937. And there at the front of the queue, the members of the public, and they will file past that in all its in sombre glory, I suppose you could say.
He sounds like he's under pressure trying to think of the words.
You can just see there the politicians paying their respects, which the public will go on to do in the coming hours and days.
Just see John Redwood, the Minister of Course, in the frame there, as each member of the House of Commons comes forward, bows their head, taking just this brief moment to pay their respects while they can before the public are allowed in. About to see Sajid Javid, of course, Tory leadership candidate, only 5 minutes ago. It's
I should have stayed down that end.
They seem to have telescoped recently.
I couldn't even get that side though, to be fair.
But as you can see from the images we were looking at while we were talking to Chris, already a kind of huge queue that's snaking. I mean, if you're not familiar with central London geography, the aerial view of the bridge we were looking at there is already quite some way from Westminster. It winds past just round the corner, Lambeth Palace. So already those people there have quite some time to wait, and it's clear the queue is very, very long already, as indeed we expected.
Yes,
as indeed
the
we
Queen Mother's
expected.
lying in state, of course, in 2002, a glorious autumn sunshine, thankfully, for those who are dedicating themselves to a very long wait. We know that there is a separate queue too, of course, for those with mobility issues, to allow as many as possible their moment of reflection and respect that we've just witnessed members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords taking their opportunity to perform.
Julia, maybe, I mean, we've touched a little bit on this, but there's so many things in stay. You know, on one level, it's about everyone having the chance to honour somebody they hugely admired, this global figure. I mean,
and had a relationship with.
Yes, and
the real relationship, although they may never have met her.
But you know, when you think back to these big reactions, it's of course totally different.
It's a real relationship, although no one's never met her.
Totally unexpected and gave everyone a tremendous shock.
Is this BBC?
But the commonality is a massive public response. I think for this reason, at this time, in quite different circumstances and perhaps for quite different reasons. But what do you think, is that just people wanting to pay their respects to a head of state? Is it a sense of the elemental nature of this, that it sort of, you know, gives us all imitations of our own mortality? What do you think drives people to come down here and spend many, many hours queuing?
I do think it's an elemental part of belonging, that when something big happens, we, as human beings, we need connection to others. And this idea of coming together and having social connection with each other, sharing, even the queue in some way will be part of the memory and part of the processing for them, talking to strangers, sharing biscuits, you know, helping each other out. I think it's a whole experience.
Sharing biscuits with strangers?
Will enable them to adjust the process to the death of the Queen. But also I think it is the sense of safety in coming together, because isolation, everything is more difficult. You know, when you do things on your own, you are less resilient, you're less able to weather the storm a bit. And there's something about social safety and safety network as a country, and the unity of that, of people coming together and bearing witness and paying their respects, which I think is very significant as a country. And just one more thing is that if the research is that if you know where your own family history is, you can say about where your grandfather is from and where your uncle is, you have more sense of security. And I think in this country we have this long sense of security of our long history that we can name, which also gives us a sort of rooted belonging that we are part of and we want to share with others.
And I'm reminded of listening to you, Julia, of the moment when the late Queen...
This is why it's called that title, boys, honestly.
We will meet again.
They're talking the
we
most.
We will meet again, and she convened the nation for her platinum
proper
jubilee.
BBC shit.
It felt like a moment when, after all those terrible, terrible months the country went through, and for so many who have lost those so dear to them, it was a moment when people could make those connections again. And I think perhaps also in the process of the mourning and the funeral that we're going to witness next Monday, too, those who have lost people will find some comfort too. And let's remind ourselves, of course, that people are queuing along the very wall where thousands of lives lost in the pandemic are commemorated. The red hearts along those walls stretch along part of this queue. It is quite a moment for the nation in so many layered ways that she instinctively knew in life.
And gave us hope. We all meet again. You know, and that gave us hope to the Jubilee. And looking at Buckingham Palace last time I was at Buckingham Palace was at the Jubilee concert, and where there was so much celebration of the Queen and Paddington and joy. And then now, what seems very recently, you know, 3 months, was it 2 months? I don't even think, 3 months.
Time telling.
Yeah.
We're all not good on time.
Pandemic world.
You could ask me about the last week, I'd probably get that wrong.
And now we are, you know, in the process of saying farewell to the Queen.
I just wanted to raise one thing though, because I think it's easily missed. Jenny, this is a question for you. If you think back over, let's just take the recent history of constitutional monarchy, since the Glorious Revolution, like 300 years. It's not always true to say that monarchs were considered the representatives of public virtue, it seems to me, and certainly you look like at some of the monarchs that weren't so great in that time. So it seems to me that the Queen's genius was to take a trend that was already underway, maybe with her father and her grandfather, and create this sense, which I think is very evident when you get this public reaction, of being the representative of, you know, the ideals that people most value, and whether we have the time to exercise them in our own lives.
Yes, I mean, I think it goes back to the head of nation point you made before, which is there's not an incumbency, it's the wrong word, but there is a service and a responsibility of the royal family as a whole, but particularly the sovereign, to reflect the mood and the feelings of the people, which the Queen did so brilliantly at the time of the pandemic. There's no question about it. So I agree with you that there have been moments where that hasn't been the case, and it's been quite it's been, at times, it's been quite dangerous. It's not just the Civil War, but it's in the long morning of Queen Victoria, for instance, where there was a danger of irrelevance, if we're being honest at that time. I think in the great crises of the 20th century is where, and it goes back to the point that Julie was making about when times are hard, we need to stick together. During those great crises,
look at that, boys, the fucking army there, look. This is what the thing that I was saying, right? So the old people on about central London was at capacity, they've had to lock it down. You've never heard nothing like it, and they've got these fucking goons all over the place, dotted up, not letting people through, blocking people's freedom of movement, inalienable fucking rights and stuff like this, being broken by people like this and the police trying to chat shit. Yeah, that's the point. I read years ago in a David Icke, well, I don't know if it's David Icke, but something along the lines of David Icke, and it was saying about they're gonna call the police in to be like with the army and that, because the army's shit. The army's got 124,000 in it, something like that, all in, including what's it called, the reserves and that. So they're going to call the police in to be the army, and all these civil enforcement agents, officers, because if you notice for the last 10, 15, it's probably about 20 years, 15, 20 years, they changed the names of the traffic wardens and all these sorts of people, and they've made them...
Detailed about history, we've just learned from Kensington House that the brooch worn by the Princess of Wales this afternoon belonged to the late Queen. Sort of details in family history and in the
anyway, what was I saying?
The day, the tiny details from history, very interesting to be provided that information from Kensington Palace.
Follow them.
Whilst we stay
well, she got absolutely no idea on the mission that I've been today, mate. We're not doing none of that, bruv. This is a plotted up one. I was come to do a surmise of what the policeman said, mate, about this locking down situation, about these civil enforcement officers about everywhere, employing fucking Serco people, SIA people to do civil enforcement jobs and that. People's rights being taken away from them by people that ain't even been sworn in to do any kind of fucking job, got no integrity. Look at the fucking state of them. Half of them don't speak English. Not that that gives anyone integrity, but it just means surely they're not fit for purpose, at least. Given that they're in the land where they're expected to communicate with indigenous people, are they not? Yeah.
There's a lot of behind the scenes work going on. I just wanted to pick up on something that you were talking about the role of faith today. And I think you referred to it as a handrail. And I think what we've seen as well today is the handrail of ceremony. For the people watching today, those lining the streets, the familiar sight of the uniforms, the marching, the sound of muffled Big Ben in Elizabeth Tower behind me here, all of those things take them back perhaps to their childhood, the many, many occasions that we've seen this wonderful British ceremonial in the past, and we see it, we witness it again. And I think
I've been saying this about the 24th, mate.
A comfort for the public as well as for the family itself. And as you were saying, the idea of history here is extraordinary in this Westminster Hall that we're talking about, the Great Hall.
I'm not riding the tube any further than I have to on that day, mate.
The trial of Guy Fawkes, as Tom said earlier, the trial of Charles I. History is writ large in this place behind me, and another chapter is being added today. And shortly they're going to open the route for those patient crowds who've been queuing since this terrible news broke, and they will start to stream over Lambeth Bridge. They'll pass the Victoria Tower gardens behind me. The Victoria Tower is the other tower at the other end of the Palace.
Honestly, if you see how many of them was employed today, it's fucking disgusting. All telling people they're not allowed to go places. It's absolutely insane. They're fucking everywhere. They're still all up here, man. Look at them. Where they're going to be tomorrow, who knows? Do you know what I mean? They're literally... I remember when fucking the job centre used to round people up and make them do jobs and shit. It's like that. It's like they rounded up the job centre.
At Lambeth Bridge
Well, this is all your illegals, mate, fucking being put to good use, apparently. Supposed good use. I don't know what the fuck's going on. But if you fucking take notice, mate, it's fucking peculiar, innit? Isn't it peculiar? Fucking strange. It does my nothing. Like, I don't know about anyone else, but it confuses me. Well, don't confuse me. It's like that saying, innit? About how much you look into something, where you end up. I can't see where I'm looking to the... There you go.
Security services indeed, and all those involved, the stewards, there are so many volunteers, Red Cross, St John's Ambulance, all along this route. It's an amazing civic effort to ensure the flow of these coming days at the Lyme State pass, we hope, in peace and tranquility.
No, the focus is obviously very much on London. We've been talking about London, we've been talking about people coming to London.
Talking about London, talking about people, talking the absolute utmost shite is what you're doing.
London.
Like you work for the BBC, mate.
The point being that there was a huge reaction everywhere, every town, every village.
I mean, it was extraordinary. I'm taking the example of Suffolk, where I had the, as I say, the surfer.
Nah, mate, nah, Welshie, that's where you're wrong, my old mucker. That's where you're wrong. They're not even that, bruv. They're fucking cattle herders, mate. They're not even protection and nothing. Listen, any manner of things could happen in front of this mob and nothing will get done about it. Nothing will get done. I'm on about woman could get her purse snatched. I'm on about the windows could go through in the shop. I'm on about all sorts of different shit, yeah? Or just any just random shit. It would all just happen and they'd do nothing, mate. And protecting property, they weren't. What property was they protecting? There was that fucking like, blockades. They're protecting the blockades. I suppose that's what they was doing, protecting the blockades. Fucking mental, mate.
And I wonder, people who can't get here, can't...
I reckon the 24th is going to be heavily infiltrated, mate, and they're going to try and, what's it called us? They're going to try and alt-right us off, what's it called? Indigenous terrorists, fucking, what do they call it?
And indeed in churches across the land, not just churches, all places.
Insurrectionists, mate.
Found their way,
I reckon they're trying to insurrection us off, mate.
In the Sunday immediately following the late Queen's death, and indeed
There'll be some Antifa-looking cunts in there, insurrectioning us
the
off.
rituals of so many faiths too.
In the parishes, parish churches.
Heavy police presence inside and out, I would suggest, mate. It's going to be fucking off-key.
There were entire villages in Suffolk who signed it, not just a proportion. I heard like 2 or 3 villages before I left Suffolk earlier in the week where the whole population signed it.
Jenny, you haven't organised or been involved in
domesticated, indigenous,
a royal wedding.
Domestic.
William and Catherine.
That's the one.
And one of the things, if we just look towards the funeral a bit, just for a moment, because it will soon be upon us, it's hard to overstate what a massive occasion that is. I mean, even some of the details, how do you get the President of the United States and the leader of every democratic ally, not to mention many, many other people? You get them here, you get them in, you've got to move them around. The US Security Service, obviously, famously tricky, understandably, about security. I mean, just give us a sense of the scale of organisation and how they'll be thinking about that.
I mean, in a way, it's too personal, which I'm thankfully not. It would be impossible to do it, and it requires that in this country we have world experts in
flat
all
plate
the various moving parts of organising something huge like this, and there was no other option but to delegate. Delegate is the wrong word, sounds patronising, but to sort of hand over the organising of the media village to the media experts, to the Metropolitan Police to do the security, to the control of the Lord Chamberlain's office to do the ceremonial, Westminster Abbey to do the, and you were in the middle of it, absolutely not interfering. You gave people what you wanted them to do. They already knew by instinct, and they probably already had plans. And then you surely well didn't interfere. If they had issues, then they would come and see you, and you would try and sort it out for them.
But it's the speed of this. you know, you had a lot of months, and I know everyone will have had a plan, but it's still like, you know, it's unbelievably quick.
Well,
the counter to that,
all you've got to do is stand next to Mark Collette and his missus, mate,
the funeral,
and then they'll talk about you.
Meticulously over many, many years. With the wedding, you had to wait to see what the bride and groom wanted.
But there is, presumably, at the heart of all of this, a dedication to honouring the late Queen's wishes. And we know, of course, from our experience with the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral, how utterly engaged.
Bruv, I can't answer the phone because it fucks the audio, bruv.
And one would assume the same would be for the funeral.
That is one of the cogs in that wheel, and you've got the military doing what they did so brilliantly this afternoon. Actually organising something like this, it's not a walk in the park, but it's a very hands-off thing.
We will discuss many more times this between now and Monday, and indeed on Monday. Well, Mary is, as you would have seen, at Westminster, close to Westminster Hall, where the procession has ended and returned to members of the royal family back to Buckingham Palace. Mary, over to you.
Yes, when we're talking about organisation, and in fact we're starting to see that next stage of that really slip into action behind us. The first tranche of the members of the public who are going to be allowed to go into the Great Hall and see for themselves and pay their respects themselves are now being filtered into the Palace of Westminster behind me. There is a very strict police presence, as you can imagine.
Oh, fuck's sake.
They're all being forced to go
Gotta
through
take this.
security.
Saw then, for the first time, my monarch as a human being, rather than just as my monarch.
Luke, I don't want to keep you any longer from your moment that you've been waiting so very many long hours for, as the next group of people come past us to go through their security checks to enter into the Great Westminster Hall. So thank you very much for taking time out of your day to do this for us. We do appreciate it. Luke Whitner, thank you very much. Thank you. Well, for Luke and all the other hundreds of people filing past, this will no doubt be a fleeting moment to pay their final farewells to the late monarch, but also an enduring one.
Okay, Nina, thank you very much indeed. And if you're thinking of joining the queue, a bit of encouragement there. You can see over Nina's shoulder it was at least moving moderately fast, so that suggests that you may have a long wait, but you will get there in the end. Now, if you've been watching, you will already be familiar with our first guest here in the studio, Jamie Lowther-Pinkerton, a former private secretary to the royal household, is still with us. But we're also joined now by Baroness Benjamin. You would have seen her many times perhaps this week. She's talked about the Queen with such incredible emotion and eloquence, and also by King Charles's now biographer, Catherine Mayer, who's written a particularly brilliant book about him. If you want to seek to understand the new king, it's a very good place to start. Florella, perhaps can I start with you? You were actually due to be at Westminster Hall to be part of the receiving party for the Queen. Can I just ask you, I mean, I think anyone who's sat through that today, it's not going to be anything they'll ever forget, that's for sure. What was your own sort of immediate response to what we've seen this afternoon?
Well, I got a message from the Lord Speaker's office yesterday to say would I actually join him to greet the Queen when she came to Albert Hall, and I had to say no because I knew I had to come here today. But interestingly, I watched it on television, and I suddenly got really emotional. I suddenly felt the same feeling that I felt when my mother died. And when somebody passes away, and you know, you hear the music and you feel the atmosphere, emotionally it does get you. And I think we're here in London, it's been the first time that we really have realised that this is the end.
Absolutely
People
mental.
in Scotland, I think they've gone through that emotion. They've had all the ceremonies there. They've seen the Queen passing through the streets and in the church. But suddenly, it's happening down here in London too. And that's just that moment. I watched it on television. Goodness knows what I'd be like if I was here at Westminster Hall. But I really felt quite emotional. And interestingly, when I was coming into the building here to be with you, I found a white feather. And whenever something happens and my mother, it reminds me of my mother, I find a white feather. So it was a very symbolic day walking into this building, finding that white feather, because I feel spiritually she'll be there to greet the Queen in heaven. She'll be there to say, welcome, Mum, join us, because she's in a heavenly place, like my mum.
It is remarkable, isn't it, Florella, that the ripples of our understanding and engagement with this have really come out of Balmoral in those first moments. And it's interesting that Catherine will dwell on this a little later too, but that journey that we saw through the Scottish countryside and the great RAF C-17 yesterday, it's sort of spread through the country, hasn't it, to this point at which London has sort of first contact, if you like, with this emotion.
Very much so, very much so. And I think people in Scotland were very lucky to have that first moment, because the Queen loved Scotland, she loved Scottish people. I've had the joy of actually staying in Holyrood House. I know how much they think about her there, and that whole feeling of having the presence of the Majesty of the Queen in that part of the world. And so it was great that they could celebrate that. And we, as Londoners and down south, we could only look in their window of opportunity and joy and celebration, because I think we have to celebrate a life. We are celebrating a life, even though it's sad. We have to remember the things that happened and what has been given to us, our human spirit and our soul, which is what we need to have somebody that we can have that continuity in our life. And so here in London, and I think it started last night when you saw the mobile phones.
It was wonderful, wasn't it?
And it suddenly gets to you. And I remember the same thing when my father died. When I went to the morgue and I saw him, because I'm not afraid of death. I've seen dead people from the time I was 10. I spoke for my first dead person, and I realised how...
What is she on about? What is she on about? Speaking to dead people.
And the soul and the spirit. So I'm not afraid of death. But when you don't know how you will actually react.
Jujuing up the ITV scene and that.
For the people down here in London, especially people come from all over the world.
Kick it off.
Same feeling and experience, but so
kick it off at Park Lane.
The nearness of it, the nearness of death, and the final kind of hours you have with that person. hits home, and it's quite, it's quite emotional.
Well, it is impossible to. We've talked about this quite a lot this afternoon, about when you see something like this, it's sort of the end is very elementally there. Catherine, can I bring you in on a whole number of fronts? I know you're, no stranger to grief. What is your own
no stranger to grief
feeling about today? You've obviously,
What's the most grieving? What's the most grieving factor of grief? Please tell us, what is the most grieving factor? Yeah, we've got a couple of buds over here, and they can tell us the most grieving factor of the grief. Should we actually do some work today after all the fucking running about? Oh boys, it ain't been fun running around
she would
today.
find it even more of a physical stress because she doesn't have the same constitution that he does of just powering through with this. But, I pick up also on something Florella said. It is about grief. It is about public grief blending with private grief and
French
the sort of resonance
fucking
of that.
Templar fucking situation that is.
The ways in which the Queen, but also all of the royal family, in ways that are not often acknowledged,
Oh, Martin, mate.
markers for our lives.
It's like fucking. It's 4:30 in the afternoon, mate.
The moment of the,
Can't be any of that sort of talk.
Horse-drawn carriage emerging, very
Talking
much
like that, mate.
Diana's funeral procession, the tolling of the bells, all of this. We all, even whether monarchists or Republicans or a large number of people who don't care much either way most of the time, without realising it, have measured our lives against these sort of very significant moments. And, so I thought, I'm the same age as Diana would have been. I absolutely thought about that funeral. But I also thought, as a journalist, I attended Margaret Thatcher's funeral in St. Paul's. And I remember being really struck then in the same way that many of us
people don't. That's what I mean. People don't seem to fucking bat an eyelid. Like these are different sorts of people than you. Royal family, prime ministers. They have different fucking dues, mate. You lot can go and get burnt down the road, yeah. And these lot will get buried in fucking St Paul's Cathedral and the like. Like, come on, mate.
These events remind us incredibly forcibly that not only does the human body not endure, but power doesn't endure, position doesn't endure, all of these
your plebs ain't allowed in there. That's some bullshit. They don't want the plebs in. There's plenty of space for more plebs.
Jamie, you were about to say.
Can I just jump in quickly? The person that actually affected me the most when I watched the procession was Prince Harry. Because he's spoken so openly about his emotions walking behind, and I was just hoping, and I wanted to hug him and say, it's all right, you have to move on in life, but don't let that grief eat you up. And you could see in his face that, he was actually, out of all the people there, you could see emotionally kind of reliving those moments of his mother being carried away.
And it was so painful to watch him back then.
Yeah.
Those boys, both of them.
I actually read that into his face.
And yes,
what does she major in? Who the fuck is that woman?
Yeah.
Jamie, you were about to jump in.
Coming here spouting all that juju and that, bruv. Oh my goodness.
Incredibly eloquent.
What was she saying? Fucking seancing at the age of 10 or something. Fucking weirdo, mate.
And my sort of overriding emotions are, I think,
keep the children away from the fucking left,
and the impact that she has had on everybody. And also, I mean it in a quiet sense, but pride, and pride in a number of different ways. I mean, pride in the way that this was mounted this afternoon by everybody. Pride in the way that the British people have come out to honour the Queen. I mean, extraordinary. And actually, pride, just imagine if you're...
What is all this, boys? This proper end of day shit, mate.
The turmoil
what am I listening
in the last 5 or 6 years.
What am I
This is an
listening
affirmation. This is really saying that pride bit and thankfulness put into the cocktail is hope for the future. It's a stamping of hope. I really feel that actually, and you've sort of unlocked the soldier's emotion here. But that's what I feel.
Nats.
Is that this is giving me real hope for the future. and it's an affirmation of who we are and what we are and what we're capable of.
It's always made us stop and think, hasn't it?
Yeah,
I think everybody has stopped to think, how do we move forward? You know, we can't go back and be the same as, but
Here we
this is
go.
a movement that allows us to, it's a box is open to say,
Here we
this
go.
is what it could be, this is what, you know, maybe it should be, how are we going to do it? And we can only do that together.
And
They're all in on it, mate. They're all singing from this fucking hymn book, mate, and it makes you sick.
Actually, that's the great gift of our nation, I think, is that we have been able to take these very sad circumstances throughout our history and turn it into what comes next, rather than looking back. When we haven't been able to do that, then we've hit rocky road.
Mournhub.
Done it today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree
It's
with more.
mental is what it is. It's
This is against a backdrop of
pure
great hardship. We must have
programming,
mentioned,
propagandising
we have had
shite,
turbulent
mate.
years behind us. There are tough times to come yet too.
Look at 'em, but they tell you
those things that will
blatantly to your
unfold,
face.
Of course, in the days
This is why it's a
after,
good idea to keep your ear to the ground, mate.
Funeral next week.
And
There's
actually
still
bear
many
it.
challenges
It's
ahead.
horrible having to listen to it.
You
Like.
can see the burden of state almost
they
on
torture you like
the
you're
new
fucking
King's shoulders
fired.
as we've watched some of these pictures unfold. Also witnessing
Probably being generous. They torture you
all
like
of this
you're
at close hand is our royal editor Chris Shipp, who's been stationed just outside Buckingham Palace this afternoon for the whole of the royal family today. A very emotional afternoon, Chris.
You know, Julie, it feels rather empty here right now, given that sort of wave of emotion that we had.
Charles was one that called
20
on the
past 2
fucking-
this afternoon, and that military
Mate,
ceremony
Charles
that
has
passed,
been bastion
behind
of
us
that,
here.
mate.
And picking up on the
For
conversation that
fucking
you've just been
40
having in the
years,
studio,
bro.
I can't,
And now
I
he
always
thinks he's
remark
king
on
of the fucking
ability
world. Are you
of
mad?
Members of the royal family, but
Well,
also
this
members of the military
this
who
don't
were
end well,
carrying
boys.
the coffin, the bearer party, and members of the household as well. How they're able to maintain their emotions. Because as I was standing here, Julie, from this side I could hear the minute guns being fired from Hyde Park, and from that side I could hear the Big Ben being told every minute as well for the 38 minutes it took for them to walk. And you'll be interested to know that the King's standard has been lowered atop Buckingham Palace. The Union flag has returned, and we saw a helicopter leave a little while ago, so we are presuming that the King has gone to Highgrove. We don't know for sure, we're waiting for confirmation, but
Oh, that was the King in that
spoken
helicopter,
about how
boys.
he has had this
That was
dual
the King
task,
camp on
this week.
himself.
One is to lead the nation in mourning and be the new king, and secondly is to lead his family as well in mourning. So I think
He lead us all
most
down the
people would
garden
agree that it's
pathway
time
straight to the Swanee.
for the king perhaps to have a moment of personal reflection, and looking at him there with the Duke of Sussex and the new Prince of Wales as well, walking side by side. And Tom, me and you were only talking, weren't we, on Saturday night about
We're
those
in course
remarkable
for some
images
very
outside
tumultuous time.
Windsor Castle on the long walk, when the two brothers decided to put their differences aside, albeit momentarily. And I don't think we can say for certain that this is a big reconciliation, but there's all that sort of family dynamic here as well, having to breathe in this way, in a very public way, as they walk up the Mall there, and yet they've got their own family difficulties, I think it would be safe to say. But for the sake of the late Queen, and in order to give the King the maximum possible a positive start in the new reign, the two brothers did, on Saturday at least, decide to put those things to one side, and we saw the Duchess of Sussex in Westminster Great Hall as well. They were meant to be back in America by now, and obviously circumstances have changed quite a lot.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. And we were just replaying alongside Chris there some of the, I mean, there's so many beautiful images of the afternoon, not least this extraordinary military ceremony that we saw unfold with absolute
Didn't see none of it, mate.
precision along the route of the Mall. Many things to reflect on as we look back on what we've witnessed in these past couple of hours. That great shot that both Catherine and Floella were mentioning there, now you can see on screen of the Duke of Sussex making his way as part of that procession.
Yes, I mean, I think it's indisputable that for him that looked like a very tough walk for all the obvious reasons we perhaps don't need to rehearse. I think one of the interesting things to me about that, the cameras were on the procession there, but
it was also just fascinating to hear the response of the crowd. I guess I probably expected that procession to go down in silence, but what was interesting was people clearly wanted to have a response, didn't quite know, it seemed to me, what the appropriate response would be. And so, you know, we had those kind of the quiet applause, sometimes the slightly louder applause, you know, isolated cries of "God Save the King" or "Long Live the King" as he left. I mean, Catherine, maybe this is a good moment to bring this back to you as we contemplate the new king. I think we're just on watching there some of the crowd reaction, but he's gone to Highgrove now. I mean, you would know better than I. That's his sort of, you know, spiritual home. I mean, if Windsor was the Queen's kind of primary home, Highgrove is really, and that implies no surprise, and perfectly reasonably, he probably needs a bit of headspace.
Yes, and I was only saying it's one of them because, as you know, what he's done is over the years he's built himself. It's not just homes that are where his escape. You know, he needs the escape hatch, but in those homes,
he needs to get helicopter there straight away, mate.
Things that he cares about as a gardener, but he also plants.
Well, I spoke to a lady earlier on, some sort of royal family.
And the gardens
I said, did you see the way he acted over the pen?
The places that he goes to
She
think,
goes, yeah.
You've
never seen her do that. She goes, no, never.
And there isn't.
I think people don't.
I think
I don't think this is going to pan out well, mate, for him either. So I don't know where that leads the old West situation. Hopefully they're shit. I see something earlier on today about Germany saying that they're not allowing people to take the vaccine no more. I don't know how true it is. I've seen it on one thing, I ain't managed to see it on anything else. So,
it's a really interesting moment for him.
You never know, like, they might all end up swinging for it, fuck knows. You don't, didn't you? You don't let all swing from the tower, mate, to be fucking honest.
For example, Clive Alderton, who's been with him for a long time as an aide, but the people who were his friends in his touchstones, the closest, the ones who really got royal life, who got what he was in.
Quite a good idea.
You know, that's this is a point more than a question. That's the thing when you lose your parents, isn't it? It's, we all know this probably, and many people watching will know this. It's like, okay, no, thank you, you are not. But
Hanover, isn't it?
Where you realise you're at the top of the line, and it's quite a shock. And there isn't, you know, we're used to going up for a bit of advice here and there.
So
you can't anymore. That is one thing.
No, but he likes spiritual advice, and a friend of mine, Bishop Jones, who used to be the Bishop of Liverpool, often goes to Highgrove to speak to the King, Prince Charles at the time, when he needed guidance, spiritual guidance, things that he didn't really understand. And he's always seeking spiritual advice from people who he trusts, who will tell him the truth, who will actually help him build his inner soul. And I think over the last few years, we've seen how happy he's become within himself, accepting things that he might have done that he wished he hadn't done, but also being able to face the future in a spiritually strong, happy way. Because as you get older, he's the same age.
It's all this spiritual talk, mate. They're going to bring on the religion, aren't they? The spiritual religion. Spiritualism.
He's in a good place when you get to this age, and I think he's in a good place to handle the wealth of responsibility that is on his shoulders now. And one thing he always does, he listens, and he asks people who will help him.
The wealth of responsibility is on his shoulders now.
How he can make life better, change the world, and make it a
I see a clip the other day about him servicing people, and what it means to service people. It means to help people out even if they don't even think you're helping them out. Oh mate, it sounds so scary.
Fortunate that we have our colleagues out and about in the capital this afternoon. We're told that a huge scene the late Queen's coffin is
colleagues out and about, Jim was out and about, mate, saw fuck all.
Some of those close to the front, so Nina is there, Nina.
Julie, thank you. Yes, we're in the very privileged position of being extremely close to the front of the queue now. The latest
come out late, mate.
group of 150 people who've been queuing for hours are now very close to going through security and getting their first glimpse of the latest models. I think among them are two friends in this, I have to say, really friendly atmosphere this evening here, just on the outskirts of Westminster Hall. Susie and Colleen. If I can start with you, Susie. Did you have a moment where you just thought, I'm going to go down to that queue, I'm going to be there?
Yes, just Colleen got in touch with me and said, you know, it's a moment in history and we should be there to pay our respects, and that's what we wanted to do. We have only ever known the Queen, so, you know, she's been a constant in our lives and we want to pay our respects.
The two of you are friends from university, a strange but solemn and remarkable place for this reunion at the moment.
Yes, definitely. But for me, it's coming home. I come from London. It feels right to be in London to say goodbye. Seems right.
You've been rewarded with some absolutely beautiful, stunning September sunshine. We've just heard that the queue is now around 2.5 miles long.
2.5 miles long.
We went forward, if you like, at 6:45 we got here. Yeah. So we were quite lucky and we had some lovely friends, you know, some nice people.
Carl, how long do you reckon you get nicked for going to make a scene there then, boys? How long do you reckon they give you for going to fuck up the Queen's night? Like, nothing too outrageous, just super glue yourself to the coffin or something. Like XR would, how long do you reckon you get?
What it might be like in reality for you.
I think we've all said that, you know, it's going to be emotional. And we had moments this morning.
Oh mate, you'd get so much shit for that you could never even get your way out of it, mate. I say all publicity is good publicity, but I reckon they would cancel the life out of you, mate. No PayPal, no nothing, no bank accounts. Proper traitor you off, mate, like you bastards. You sold the nation out a long time ago and you got the audacity, but whatever.
She's always been there, so to me, I don't even know the Queen. Obviously, getting married to a king, and obviously in our lifetime, we're never going to, I'd like to see another Queen.
Oh, sorry chaps.
Yeah, you know, said everyone was chatting this morning about their memories. A couple of people hadn't met her. But yeah, it was, you know, it was nice sort of talking and sharing. You know, it just always feels, the Queen always felt so personal, even if you haven't met her.
I'm not saying about lefties doing it, I'm on about me doing it, mate. I'm about Jim Boy going in there fucking super gluing himself to the old coffin, boys. I say this is to bring attention to the fact that there's only 4 members of Parliament in the House of Commons to debate the cases of vaccine injury from the thing. Yeah? So this is, and like, all that sort of shit, all the injuries caused by all of them, mate, basically. This is basically fucking pharmacare, innit? Basically, the whole fucking, it's the devil's industry, mate. They're lying to people. They make people ill to then treat them. They treat their symptoms. It's mental, mate. It's fucking insane. And that's why the normies don't want to get their head around it. It's like, what do you mean the government want me dead? And what do you mean Big Pharma are helping them do it? What do you mean I'm paying everyone to do it at the same time? You're mental. Yeah, alright, mate. Sure. Sure. Okay, alright, mate.
Still, it's surrounded to that stage. He was so wanted to be on his words and his year and my overriding thing about Prince William is that he has this north point.
Absolutely mental.
judgment. His judgment is really outstanding. And actually, King Charles and the Prince of Wales have become very, very close in recent years. And I think it will be a great combination going forward. And he'll draw a lot from his son, who is well capable of stepping out and coming to the plate in that respect. Yeah.
Well, how do you think that dynamic's going to work, Jane?
Well, I think
I swear they must have an earpiece and every time they go anywhere near the Constitution, they just get told, get away from that subject. Shut it down, shut it down, shut it down.
Of the Gloucesters and the Kents, etc., have been outstanding at touching the national consciousness right across the planet. They're not going to be there forever. And I think one of the things that you will see is the development of a new way of approaching relevance and maintaining relevance across the board. And it will centre upon the main line, you see. And I think it will be very interesting to see how the Prince of Wales and the King do this together, and that's how I think it's going to happen.
I'd love to come back to you in a moment to talk about character as well. So, because the Princess of Wales, because she's a fascinating character in all this, who obviously has, a major new role. But Fleur and Catherine, can I just ask you maybe to reflect that? Because you had Jamie a little while ago saying that today actually gives him a lot of hope. As Jimmy was mentioning, it's not the world's best time for the country. But apart from what we've seen over the past week, people got a lot.
Not the world's best time for the country. These people are just talking the most shite.
How do you feel about the way ahead this evening?
Well, I think you're absolutely right about Prince William. He unveiled, helped unveil the National Windrush Monument at Waterloo. So I got to work with him in his office for a few weeks beforehand. And I could see how much he wanted to listen and to learn about the Windrush generation, about the Windrush people, about the situation he was going to be put into. And on the day when he turned up, he reminded me so much of his mother. He took time to speak to every single person, asking them questions, wanted to know more about them, and he took time in understanding the kind of speech he should make so that he would be sensitive about the issues. And I think that's a very big combination he had with his father and his mother.
This whole situation with all them buds working everywhere as security, and that's weird, mate.
Bring forward something that is going to evolve the whole monarchy. And I feel that he is somebody, when you look at some of the issues that the king had actually championed over the years, he'll now take over the environment. He speaks proudly about that. He speaks proudly about diversity.
Should we ask the old Bill what they're doing about people smoking the ganja?
And get kind of an insight into
So I see a couple of lads smoking weed over there.
who is in a position as he is to make that difference. So I have huge hope.
See what they do and then start having a fucking skin up in front of them.
That we, the country, will need
I'm going to skin up.
as he leads forward. Because it's very
Not in front of them
difficult
particularly, but I'm going to skin up and then I feel we're going to fuck off. I was going to wait for George, but I don't know. I'm just fucking knackered now, man. My feet really do hurt.
What are the personal qualities that the new Prince of Wales and the new King might bring to this role? There is a pressing question, though, surely, isn't it, about how the younger generations in this country relate to the monarchy. Whatever their characters, it's just things have shifted. What they
Things have shifted.
this afternoon, and whether they see this as a country that they connect with, given everything that they have experienced, this generation, whether they've navigated, or they have navigated the pressures of the pandemic. What's your observation on that?
It's interesting. I had never thought that this would be a time of heralding the monarchy as some Republicans thought, because I always expected the surge in public sympathy for the new king and for the family, and you see that happening, and you see I spend more time on social media than I should, but it means I even spend time on social media frequented by young people, and it means I've seen a lot of the reactions
And things that, in fact, older people have been critical of. So, for example, his serial arguments with pens, and the shows of temper from the New King. I noticed that the older demographic was critical of that because it wasn't what his mother would do, whereas younger people...
This is what I mean, they're even talking about that whole situation themselves. They're doing this on purpose, obviously, just for the want of stating the obvious. We're shown what we're shown, not by accident, but by purpose.
Why he stayed as his son. But he has come to symbolise...
They're engineering this. I think, obviously, as a bastion of this fucking climate change nonsense, though, that sinks with him, man, I'm saying. No?
And there is hope that
God, they're gonna nick everyone's money, mate. If that don't make people right, I don't know what will. But everyone's bank account's gonna be like zilcho, boy.
In terms of manipulating beyond who they are, and it was interpreted...
That's what they're gonna do.
Them both representing in a way different value sets. So the Walesers, whether any of this is true or not, came to stand for continuity and therefore the establishment.
Continuity?
And
congruence.
Somehow in that public imagination, and particularly younger people, come to stand for the progressive values. And in a polarised world, that's actually a difficult place to be. And their exit has also left this kind of demographic gap because of how young Prince George is. And so my question, when you look at that procession, when you look at anything that's happened, and it's been confirmed so beautifully, but firstly we mustn't assume that there is no dissent, because there is absolutely dissent out there. There are people of all ages who...
Can you hear this about dissent?
Supporting this. There are people who are upset because of the disruption, Operations cancelled, period of crisis, the sense of stasis.
All the boys are connected, aren't they?
I think
6 degrees of separation and all that.
It isn't. It's the best start that the king could have had in the circumstances.
Yeah.
That's a whole load of really interesting points. What does today change and what doesn't change?
I think today, in a way, got over.
Doesn't change anything, mate.
But when we're talking about...
As it stands, we don't have a king. He ain't taken an oath. He ain't the king. He's proclaimed himself king when his mother was still warm, mate. He's a disgusting serpent of a man, creature thing. That's like...
That's also, of course, when you go...
How can you sit there and have the gall to tell people you've got 12 days of mourning whilst proclamating yourself the fucking master of the land? Like, fuck off, mate. Get out of it. And in his proclamation stating that he was giving over sovereignty in receipt of the grant, the monarchy fucking sustainment grant, or whatever the fuck it's called. Yeah? The whole time the prince has got Cornwall and he's got Lancaster duchies everywhere. Behave, mate. The whole thing's a fucking swindle. Don't have to pay 40% inheritance tax. Of course he don't. Like, fucking swindle, mate. People don't care. People don't care. Oh, I'm stuck in the past. I'm a fucking conspiracy theorist. Like, tradition don't mean nothing to people. The rules don't mean nothing to people. But yet they want to hold you accountable as when it's fuck off, man. Fucking nonsense, mate. I do wonder what a world would be like with governance and rulers that weren't paedophiles. I wonder if it would be like, if society would be... I wonder what society would look like, how like prosperous and flourishing it would actually be in comparison to what all the nonsense do to it. I wonder, mate.
Well, Julie, I think there were so many interesting points that Catherine was raising there, and I've always thought that this moment, the moment we are witnessing right now, was the sort of maximum moment of potential weakness for the royal family, moving from a beloved queen who has had this job for 70 years to her son, who I think most people agree hasn't yet earned that same degree of affection. And once I'm struck by the quickness of this transition, we also have to talk about how much smaller the royal family as an institution appears, at least to me. And I've been doing this job for about 5 years, as you well know, Julie.
I've been doing this for about 5 years, as you well know. But the fucking only thing is told the truth about all afternoon, the cunt. Probably won't even tell the truth about that, giving her a little kick under the table, mate.
People who work for Clarence House have been told there will be a round of redundancies coming because Clarence House no longer exists. Harry and Meghan are no longer in the picture. They're always sort of and not working roles. In fact, dare I say, even when I started doing this job, the Duke of York was a working member of the royal family. There has been so much change in the royal family in these times.
The Grand Old Duke of York, mate.
Look at it right now. You have this
he had 10,000 men.
King Charles III and the Queen Consort.
He marched them up to the top of the hill and he marched them down again.
George, Charlotte and Louis.
And when they're up, they're up. When they're down, they're down.
It feels to me like a much
When
smaller
they're halfway up,
institution
they're up or
than
down.
previously. And again, a moment potentially of weakness. I'd also say that I think if the new king has one strength, it's authenticity. I think
oh, he's authentic, all right, isn't he?
The way in which older generations do. I think it's younger generations, and I was interested to hear what Catherine was saying about the response on Twitter with the pen sort of etc. But I think younger generations do value authenticity, and King Charles, Prince Charles as he was, has never tried to be indifferent. He's always campaigned on the environment. He's always spoken about plastic pollution in the 1970s, and that's an issue that young people really do care about. So if you sort of, a point of strength, it would be that.
Chris, for the moment, thank you very much indeed for that.
Chris, for the moment, is that fucking Danny's brother?
It's time to take a moment now to look back on the history that has unfolded.
You're a bit warm in that, mate.
Over the course of this afternoon, and indeed, it's still taking place.
There we go, Mingrees boys. Mingrees on the old 6. Mingrees on our 6. They're trying to catch me at it, mate.
Thank you too, perhaps.
And they're starting to do just that after MPs and members of the House of Lords have paid their respects.
Yeah, the plebs have got to wait, of course. You can get to the back of your 3 fucking mile queue, mate. You pleb. Why have you sat there? What makes you feel so good sport?
It was at 2:22 precisely that the government carriage bearing the body of Her Late Majesty left Buckingham Palace to the strains of Beethoven's funeral march No. 1.
Her Late Majesty, you know?
Was followed in procession by her children, King Charles, the Princess Royal, the Duke of York, and the Duke of Sussex. Behind them, the new Prince of Wales and the Duke of Sussex.
Once at Westminster, her coffin was lifted onto the catafalque by the bearer party of guardsmen while the choir sang Psalm 139. Is there in Westminster Hall.
Well, I've had you looking at the wrong fucking thing.
Before that, she will remain there from day and night.
Do beg your pardon. Imagine that. That sun was in my eyes. Let's see where it was at.
These then scenes in Westminster Hall right now beneath that glorious hammer beam roof, scene of so many great moments, notable moments, infamous moments in British history. Periodically, the vigil mounted to keep watch will change in this great hall. The Westminster Cross at the head of the coffin. The wreath on top of the coffin, drawn from flowers on the royal estates, from Balmoral, from the gardens of Windsor, white roses, white dahlias, and the imperial crown which has glinted in the autumn sunlight this afternoon.
Imperial crown?
This has been a day when the focus understandably has been squarely on the procession of the Queen's coffin, on the ceremonial, on the family. But off stage almost we've heard the response of the public. The quiet rounds of applause, the first to say louder rounds of applause. The cries in support of the King. We're just about to see the public center stage. So doors are open.
Fucking hell, pervy, mate. I was just want to make a joint.
Process of filing past the Queen. And having the moment of chance, many of them are queued
See, it's smoking his face instead.
for hours and hours to have the chance to pay their own respects to you.
A task of great honour for those who control the security and organise ceremony in the parliamentary estate. We've seen them all at their duties this afternoon alongside the military. Prayers too over the late Queen's coffin, presided over by the Archbishop of Canterbury. The beautiful music of the choir at Westminster Abbey and the Chapels Royal this afternoon. And Alistair's coffin was brought into the great space of the hall with Psalm 139.
We have the first people coming in. We're watching them. Julie was referencing the security issues there. We just saw Black Lord, the first female Black Lord.
What's this guy doing, mate? He's doing mad routes, boys. He's doing absolutely mental fucking routes. I can't keep up, mate. Fucking A. What way are you going? You come. Why have you gone that way? What way are you going to turn?
The very recent past, that is a very serious matter.
Fucking arsehole. I reckon you just go straight up the 180 and come back. Fucking march in the camp.
Very need to fire IMLA bombs. Recently armed attack by terrorists. These are serious matters for the Black Lord to consider. We have the very first people filing it.
Well, fuck knows what these security are getting paid to do, mate, but they're still here.
We're seeing here, maybe a little weary. They were at the front of the queue as soon as it was announced that there would be this facility for people to come in to pay their respects. Those that we're seeing first are the ones who have been there already around the hands of the clock.
Seeing these people queued
Oh.
just for the briefest moment, but with no doubt
Signing across gestures for people of all faiths and none.
Just trying to find
Was equally committed.
Oh, boys, have a look. That's his gym in a minute. After he smoked a joint. Bless them, eh? They've had a brilliant day. Didn't they? Fucking blinding day, mate.
This afternoon. You know, one of the things, certainly the day is actually going out and about and watching.
I've done it and I fucked it up again.
Principles in an environment which just doesn't often get acknowledged. That's what people say over and over again. They came, they showed an interest.
Dreaming in Margate, mate, 100%.
Public service.
100%. Margate.
Those are the people we're seeing. You articulated it very well there, that they do a lot of debates that doesn't get any coverage, be that on television, newspapers, or even in magazines. And I think members of the royal family often get frustrated that a lot of the focus is on their personal relationships or you know, the relationships within the family. And
all these birds flying over above me. I got shit on the other day.
Use
shit on again.
Use their position in the royal family and that very unique position they have to shine a light on the charity and to allow people to give the work of that.
People have no idea, mate. I would hazard a guess. If I was to hazard a guess, I would say I'll put a tenner on it. It's not even a guess, it's turn it into a bit. People know nothing about it.
On their own face.
Government have got all these plans. I get these newsletters, weekly newsletters about this internet of things shit, yeah? About this framework that they've got, like this infrastructure that they've built to get these drones flying around. They're going to do all these deliveries by, they've got this hyper-wave fucking drone thing. It's going to get directed about by the 5G, but I don't know what the fuck, right? But I'm saying, mate, it's going to be weird. What we're going to hear is whizzing about these little fucking drones, mate. You've seen it in China already, mate. What are they doing? Being quiet. They're telling people in China, mate, they're telling them, you better get into your fucking little apartment bit there, mate. You better lock the door and stay locked in, mate. You know what happens? They end up jumping out the windows, mate, from the top of the fucking, top of the thing, like. It's not well, is it? Margaret. What's that? Who's whistling? Oh, she's awake now, boys. Does she know we filmed her? That will work out now, she can close her eyes again. Fucking jolly exciting. On that note, jolly exciting, sombre note, I might turn it all off, boys. Save a bit of battery. I'm going to try and start brainwashing everyone again. In that case, so I think it's our duty to have a watch. And call it out as and when we hear it. She's gonna burn, mate. She just sits in that sun for a couple of hours. She's gonna burn. Look, she could literally catch flies, boys. Could literally catch flies in that god, boys. Oh, we missed a phone call here. Georgie. What are you doing? No, okay. Something there. Something look right. I'm alright, mate. How are you? Good. What time are you working till?
Sorry?
What time are you working till?
What time I finish?
Yeah.
8.
8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Well, what's going on? What time's all this going on till?
It's gonna go till. Oh, it's gonna continue, I think.
It's gonna continue the whole time?
Yeah.
All night?
I think so.
Sweet. That's mad.
I know.
And that's what everyone, they got all the security here, they're all working late, yeah?
Yeah, we have night shift, day shift.
You don't, but you're not stopping anyone now. But only earlier when you're stopping people.
No, you can make pictures if you want. Just.
Yeah, no, but earlier when they weren't letting no one in.
Where, inside?
In here, down there.
No, inside you're not allowed to go in, but you can make some pictures if you go, the front of the screen. You're allowed.
Yeah, I hear that.
Just go there.
Yeah.
Before I think was too much people. That's
Too much people.
Yeah. I think 19 is going to be more busy.
I think 19 is definitely going to be more busy, mate.
And Sunday.
Sunday.
Don't forget Sunday. They always have party here.
Yeah, Sunday. Yeah, maybe.
The camera everywhere.
Hey?
The camera is everywhere. I see BBC there.
You see BBC? Where? We don't like the BBC. You don't like the BBC, do you? Hey. Hey. Say hello, boys. Cheers, mate. We got him, boys. We got him on the camera. Tricked him. Okay, fly catching, bruh. Trying to catch flies, bruh. Get out of my frame. Please. Hi. Why is that up there? Is that supposed to be up there?
You are seeing also people being surprised by their own emotion. So, again, as a kind of...
Just talk about upskirting. I remember my flipping brother's wedding, I got accused of doing that. Someone, back in the day, do you remember back in the day you used to go to a wedding or you go to some sort of thing and there'd be disposable cameras for people. Yeah, so there's disposable cameras. Oh look, that's a photo, mate. Anyways, all these disposable cameras. Someone gone around taking photos up the women's skirts, up all the girls' skirts and that, under the tables or whatnot. And I've got the fucking blame for it, mate. Like I'm a creepy little pervo. I was only about 12 years old, I think. That's funny though, isn't it? Oh. Anyway, on that little thing, I'm gonna end it and I'm gonna ring Georgie and see if he's having a joint or not. So there you go, boys. Cheers for tuning in. Basically, what we got from today is the police now think that they can just show off London and get these weirdos in here trying to dictate to people about their freedom of movement and shit. I don't know, it's weird, but I can see it more. It's the way he said we had to lock London down. It's like some sort of strategy they've been practicing. Shit. I don't know, but anyway, go on, I'll chat to you in a bit, boys.